Coming up today, South and North Korea agree to hold high-level talks next month aimed at easing cross-border tension. Seoul says almost every topic will be on the table. South Korea's rival parties will hold fresh talks aimed at settling their differences over the nation's free trade deal with China. The government and the ruling party want it ratified before the year is out. Plus, Russia and France agree to cooperate in their fight against the Islamic State group, but remain at odds over what should happen with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 27th of November. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon, the two Koreas have agreed to hold their first high-level governmental talks in years. The talks, set to be held in North Korea in mid-December, could mark a major breakthrough in inter-Korean relations. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Song Ji-sun starts us off.
A deal struck after 11 hours of negotiations. On December 11th, in just 2 weeks' time, the two Koreas will hold vice-ministerial level talks at their joint industrial complex in Kaesong. Further details we fine-tuned through working level contact at the border village of Panmunjom, where the talks were held on Thursday. And all outstanding issues between the two Koreas will be discussed to improve inter-Korean relations. Seoul's Unification Ministry said setting the agenda was what took the longest time to arrange. South Korea's top priority is holding regular reunions for war-separated families, but Pyongyang, as widely expected, insisted Seoul resume tours to its Mount Kumgang resort. Seoul halted tours to that area after a South Korean tourist was shot dead by a North Korean soldier in 2008. Although Pyongyang wanted to limit the scope of agendas, the two eventually agreed to the South call that a comprehensive package of deals be handled.
Seoul wanted the governmental talks to function as a channel to discuss a broad range of outstanding issues between the two Koreas. Pyongyang wanted to specify the agenda, but agreed to Seoul's proposal to make the next round of talks inclusive.
This means other agendas like North Korea's nuclear issues or easing Seoul's sanctions on Pyongyang could be dealt with at the upcoming inter-Korean talks. Thursday's working-level talks came just 3 months after an agreement was reached at high-level talks in August, although it took 2 months for Pyongyang to respond to Seoul's invitation. Reunions for war-separated families were also successfully held last month at the North Mount Kumgang resort, which was also part of deal reached then. As for the rank of officials to attend, the two sides quickly agreed to send vice-ministerial level officials. That was what halted the working-level talks in 2013. North Korea suggested the Mount Kumgang resort, Kaesong Industrial Complex, or the border village of Panmunjom as the venue for convenience of transfer, while South Korea offered to host the talks in Seoul. The South Korean government has vowed to keep up the momentum and continue building mutual trust to improve cross-border relations. The next round of talks following those on December 11th will take place either in Seoul or Pyongyang. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, over at the National Assembly, Korea's rival parties have agreed to work towards ratifying the Korea-China free trade deal next week. We have our National Assembly correspondent Ji Myung-gil on the line. So, Myung-gil, what can you tell us?
Good afternoon, Mark. Well, rival party leaders and policymakers held a meeting early this morning and agreed to work together to have the National Assembly ratify the free trade deal with China by next Monday, well, at the latest on Tuesday or Wednesday. They also agreed to have the Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee convene on Monday morning to further discuss support measures for agriculture and industries that could be adversely affected by the trade pact. After the committee meeting, the ruling Saenuri Party hopes to ratify the FTA bill in the afternoon. Apart from the FTA, the two parties also agreed to work on the passage of economic revitalization bills and other pending livelihood bills. According to the government, the Korea-China FTA, once implemented, is expected to become one of the most significant trade deals signed by either country, boosting annual bilateral trade by nearly 40%. Seoul and Beijing signed the free trade deal in June, but it has yet to be ratified by the respective legislatures of the two countries. Mark?
Well, thank you very much, Myung-gil, for that report. Now, with high youth unemployment, the thorn in the side of Korea's economic policymakers, the government has devised a new way of solving the problem. It plans to help young job seekers look for work overseas. At an economy-related ministers' meeting on Friday, the Finance and Labour Ministries said they will double the number of young Koreans working abroad from 5,000 last year to 10,000 in 2017. The government will adopt different training programs to support young job seekers interested in working in one of the 15 designated countries that are deemed to have ample job opportunities. The countries include the United States, Japan, and Singapore. The talks were as frosty as a winter's day in Moscow, but Russian President Vladimir Putin has pledged to support France's grand coalition against the Islamic State group. French leader François Hollande reiterated the West's view that Bashar al-Assad has no place in the future of Syria, but Putin said that should be up to the Syrian people to decide. Son Jung-in has this report.
The two powers signaled a new era of cooperation on Thursday following French President François Hollande's visit to Moscow. On the final leg of his diplomatic mission to forge a wider coalition against the Islamic State group, Hollande gained support from his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, who agreed on increasing intelligence sharing and intensifying their airstrikes against ISIS in Syria.
Today, we agreed to accelerate our joint work on the anti-terrorist track, to enhance the exchange of operational information in the fight against terrorism, and to organize constructive work between our military specialists.
The French leader was also assured that Russia would only strike Islamic State positions. In a joint conference, Hollande said the two agreed to strike the terrorists only and not the forces and groups that are fighting against the terrorists. Moscow has come under criticism for targeting some moderate rebel groups who are fighting ISIS and Bashar al-Assad's regime. But the two countries remain at odds over their approach toward Assad. Putin, calling the Syrian army a natural ally in the fight, said the fate of the Syrian president should be decided by the Syrian people and not by outsiders. However, Hollande maintained the position held by Western powers that Assad has no place in a post-war Syria. In line with Hollande's efforts to build a stronger anti-terror coalition, Germany has promised to help, offering reconnaissance aircraft, tanker planes, and a warship. Germany also pledged to offer satellite surveillance that could provide important information on the extremist group and help protect civilians in the region. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, Russia is planning to slap economic sanctions on Turkey in retaliation for the country shooting down one of its warplanes on the Turkey-Syria border. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev has directed the government to come up with a series of punishing measures. They could end up including restricting gas exports, halting joint investment projects, and partially banning food imports from Turkey. Russia's finance minister said the measures could even curtail commercial flights, tourism, and preparations for a free trade zone between the two countries. Earlier in the day, President Putin complained that Russia had not received an apology from Turkey, nor any offer of compensation or promise to punish those responsible for downing the jet. Turkish officials later rebuffed Putin's demand for an apology, saying it had no reason to say sorry. Turkey continues to insist the plane violated its airspace, charges Moscow denies. The Islamic State group has released a slick new English-language propaganda video telling the US, France and Russia to bring it on. It also renews its blanket threat to 60 countries standing against it, one of which is South Korea. Gwon-swa has this report.
No respite. That's the ominous title of the Islamic State group's latest propaganda video. In it, the extremist group mocks the United States for its military tactics. It also shows off the size of its territory, comparing it to the UK and Belgium. But above all, it threatens the world with more terror.
Coalition of devils, with Iran, Turkey, and Russia joining the fray. That's because the Milov Kufr will always unite you together to fight the truth.
The video shows the flags of 60 countries under the title The Global Coalition Against the Islamic State. In Northeast Asia, South Korea is included, as well as China and Japan.
So bring it on, all of you. Your numbers only increase us in faith, and we're counting your banners.
Experts say Korea is no longer a safe haven from the threat posed by ISIS.
We're not anymore far away from ISIS targets. I guess ISIS will recruit the potential jihadist warriors, especially youngest, through the world by this provocative but technically high-end media. It's really time for us to be aware of what really is ISIS, how they are different from the peaceful Islam and Muslims.
This is the second time ISIS has included South Korea in its propaganda media. The country was listed as a potential target in the September edition of the group's magazine, Dabik. 권소아, Arirang News.
Now, Pope Francis has called for urgent action to stem climate change as he continues his historic tour of Africa, visiting the UN Environmental Programme offices in Nairobi on Thursday. The Pope said it would be catastrophic if world leaders fail to reach an agreement during the upcoming UN Climate Change Conference in Paris. He urged leaders to cooperate with the scientific community as well as civil society to tackle environmental harm. Earlier in the day, Pope Francis held a mass at the University of Nairobi, where tens of thousands turned out to receive his blessing. The Pope heads to Uganda on Friday. His six-day tour to Africa, his first as pontiff, will finish in the Central African Republic. Now, within the past couple of hours, Korea's Ministry of Justice has announced that it will enhance sentencing guidelines for protesters found guilty of violent acts. And it is effective immediately. Shin Se-min reports.
No compromise with illegality. Korea's justice minister said that all protesters exercising violence and wearing masks during rallies will be punished under the enhanced guidelines. Speaking to reporters on Friday, Kim Hyun-ung said those leading or orchestrating illegal rallies or protests will be found guilty and subject to harsher punishment under the law.
Violence has been a serious challenge to law and order, and this practice must be eradicated before it's too late.
The minister said that all means will be used to enforce the new guidelines for demonstrations and rallies. Kim added that although an amendment aimed at banning the wearing of masks during rallies, which was submitted by the ruling Saenuri Party, has yet to be passed, the tougher disciplinary guidelines will be imposed, starting with those on probation. The announcement follows a recent anti-government protest that involved tens of thousands of Koreans rallying against President Park Geun-hye's labor and education reforms, an event that turned violent. The president of the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions was issued a warrant for organizing the rallies, and one of the protesters remains hospitalized and unconscious after being water cannoned by the police. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Korean stocks fared relatively well among major economies this year, rebounding from last year's major slump, according to data collected by local research firm FN Guide. Korea's benchmark Kospi is up nearly 5% compared to the end of last year. In terms of returns, Korea ranks 7th out of the world's 20 major markets over that period. Last year, Korea was a lowly 19th out of 20 after logging a 4.8% dip. Experts say this year's index performed strongly on the valuation merits of Korean stocks. Of the 20 markets this year, Italy's FTSE MIB index took the top spot with a gain of over 17%, followed by France's CAC 40 and Germany's DAX. According to experts, low oil prices and the strong dollar against the local currency played key roles in the respective markets. LG Display plans to invest nearly $9 billion on new OLED facilities to tap deeper into the lucrative segment. The Korean company said it will build a new factory in Paju, north of Seoul, to produce large OLED panels for TVs as well as flexible panels for smaller devices. The company will spend an additional $1.5 billion for the new factory, which is set to be completed in the first half of 2018. Experts say LG Display is ramping up production and investments in an effort to dominate the OLED TV market. Now, if you're watching us in Korea, you'll be well aware that today was the day winter really kicked in. Most of the central region woke up to sub-freezing temperatures, and it really isn't going to get that much warmer today. The mountainous area of Daegwallyeong in Gangwon-do province saw a bone-chilling morning low of minus 9.1 degrees Celsius. That's the coldest temperature recorded anywhere in Korea so far this season. The rest of the central region didn't really fare much better. At 5 a.m. Local time, the mercury in Seoul was at minus 7 degrees Celsius, and it felt even colder with the wind chill. Daytime highs nationwide today will range between 1 to 10 degrees Celsius, so like those people there, keep a thick jacket on hand if you are heading out on the streets. With that, let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's all we have for now on this Friday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome. Thank you as always for watching, and do have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.